The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Good evening and welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic show. We are live from New York City. It's 9:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and thank you for being with us tonight. Our topic is leadership, as every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to be sharing stories and a reflection on leadership. Our number is 1-800-508-5431. It's open for your calls. Our very special guest tonight is Mrs. Sanyan Xiang, who is the Executive Director of Fuquay Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics School at Duke University and a professor with Duke Spratt School of Engineering. She's an advisor for GV, former Google Ventures, Duke Corporate Education, the Sports Innovation Lab, and she has also published thought leaderships that has appeared in Forbes, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal, and CNN. She is a LinkedIn 2017 Top 10 influencer and a 2018 Thinkers 50 on the Radar. She has written an award-winning book called The Launch Book, which is motivational stories for launching your ideas, business, and next career. Sanya has a bachelor in biomedical engineering and has an MBA from Duke University. Sanyan, welcome to the show, and thank you very much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Diana, I'm honored and delighted to be here.
So you have a very diverse leadership background. You are executive director, you are professor, you're author, you're an award-winning author, you're a coach, you're advisor. How did you always know that you're going to be, doing all these different forms of leadership?
Actually, if I looked at my career and if I were to go back to my 21-year-old self, none of this is within my scope of imagination. At that time, when I was 21, I was getting my biomedical engineering degree, trying to figure out what's next. And one of the things I discovered is being open to possibilities and where the road may take us. And so that I sort of jumped into one opportunity after another, soaking up, learning, and different opportunities open up after that. And that's what led me down the path here to where I am today. I think it all stems from having being very curious about the world. I see the world as a place that is full of awesomeness, awesome people, awesome ideas, full of wonder waiting to be discovered. And so given that, I didn't know where life and career was going to take me, but I believed it would take me somewhere interesting, somewhere where I'll be continuing to learn. And that's what I love doing today.
Interesting. And would you say that this particular movement contributed to you becoming, actually your openness to experiencing different ways of moving in a different leadership roles help you actually grow and reach, be where you are today?
Yes. This idea. So let me just say it started with a failure. That's when it was started with a failure in college when that type of failure, and when we think about failure, there's two types of failures. There's, at the end of the day, failure is an outcome different than the one you had hoped for. So there's failures that was your own undoing, and then there are failures that are circumstances beyond your control. And I had, because of my own doing, had landed on this major failure that gave me cause to pause, stop planning, and really reflect on who I am, what am I about, what do I value, and it also opened up a different set of perspectives, which is to not be so in control of the path, but to be able to take a breath, reflect, and then really be open to seeing what's all the opportunities out there. And I share that because today, when I'm talking with a lot of my students at Duke, one of the pieces of advice I share with them is the type of jobs that you're going to be in when you graduate 4 years from now, 2 years from now, probably doesn't even exist yet. And so how do you prepare for such types of jobs? It's all about preparing by forming good relationships, preparing by having the right mindset, and preparing by having an openness to learning and being curious.
I really appreciate you bringing that up because, I read stats that people, usually have before 1960, people had only one job, but, everything has changed. Like people have multiple careers and throughout their lifespan. So staying curious definitely does help you move into, open the door to many different careers. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think careers are no longer linear, right? So it's before, when people stay in one job, they might stay there for 20, 30 years. Or if they move jobs, they move to a similar type of career within the same industry. Today, careers, there's more opportunities and more options. So I see it's okay. People are more accepting of people who stay at a job, especially millennials, for 2 or 3 years, and then they pivot to what seems to be a completely different career. And that's all right. Careers are non-linear nowadays. And a big part of what I think about in leadership is really about the mindset. So knowledge and skill sets, I believe people can learn those. Mindset, it has to start with the mindset, right? So if you are, I played the cello once a long, long, long time ago, and I think that's why you and I connect so well, because you're a cellist. I might have started off thinking I want to be a cellist, having a dream of being a cellist for the Philadelphia Orchestra, for example. And then somewhere along the way, something happens, and being able to, that path might change. And it might take you down to being, for example, an entrepreneur instead. Well, the mindset is, there's a connective thread in the mindset that's connected to who you are in those careers. That's why it's pivoting rather than just shifting. But the skill sets and the knowledge, those you continue to learn, and that's how you continue to grow.
So I want to go back to what you mentioned. You kind of said a little bit of my story. I'm a cellist, and then I performed, and now here I am being a radio host. What struck me when I was going through all these roles is that mindset was really thing that I needed to, in some respect, I needed to allow myself to try new things and not think that because I'm doing something else, I have failed.
Yes.
And I think that's, when I talk to a lot of musicians, because we are very conditioned to do one thing for the rest of our lives, I think that's the first thing that comes in a conversation, that if you try to do something else, you might be considered a failure, right? And I think that itself might stop you from trying other interests.
Yes, and
what's your thinking on that?
Well, and I think part of that is also discovering who you are and discovering what your talents and skill sets are. And so it's, you are a gifted teacher. I mean, you're part of your story that was so compelling is that you are teaching people who are not 10-year-olds or 5-year-olds. You're teaching them when they're all grown up to take on a new instrument. And that's a gift. That's a gift. And when I think about every single person has a distinctive set or combination of gifts, by being able to continue to discover how those gifts can be deployed to make a positive difference in the world, requires also different different paths. Don't you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, and I think also that the faster you accept and align your mind to that new path, the faster you can actually grow faster in that new path. That's my thinking.
Yes, and there are two words that have come up so much in the leadership literature in the last few years. One word is being adaptive. How fast
Yes.
are you able to adapt? And how fast is your organization able to adapt to the super fast rate of change that we're experiencing today? Right, so that's one. And the other one is really about agility, which is the speed at which you are able to adapt. So adaptability and agility, those are both key aspects, I think, of the leadership mindset today. That are more critical. They've always been important, but I think they're more critical today than, say, 2 or 3 decades ago.
And why do you think that?
It's a rate of change. It's a rate of change. It's a exponential rate of change, and one of the reasons why I think about launching, and I wrote the launch book, is whether I'm talking with students or I'm talking with chief executives or managers across the entire spectrum, everyone is in the process of launching something, because a launch is a change from the status quo. And part of the reason it's so much easier to have things stay the way they are. I mean, that's our comfort level. But the reason why we have to launch is because there's external changes that's happening, that's in which if we stay the status quo, things will get worse. So we actually have to move forward and launch and respond to that change.
Let's talk about your launch book. I said to you, I read it twice. I was very impressed. I actually read it before I started launching this radio show, because I wanted to, I was very curious. And it did help me to understand, the ways that you can go about better launching. And I would just, can you tell us a little bit more what prompted you to write a book? I believe personally they can be used for parenting, for, if you want to open I really think the book is, one word I have is universal, for me. And it was just like, it's a very good, a guidebook to send you off on your way to do really great things with your life. So can you tell us a little bit what prompted you to write, and who did you write for? What was the...
So if you could see me right now, I have the biggest smile on my face. And thank you. One of the things that I believe good leaders do is that they are able to inject energy into a conversation, into the setting. And you just injected a whole bunch of energy with that wonderful feedback into my world. And it's like 9, what is it? Like it's after 9. And I just feel like I just got a equivalent of like a cup of espresso.
That's wonderful to hear.
So one of the reasons I wrote the launch book is as I was sharing, everyone's in the process of launching, whether they're launching say student graduating, they're launching into a new career post-college, their first career, or even that 60-some-year-old just thinking about launching into their next act after retirement, or someone may be launching a business, or even within their organization, we're launching a project. And there's so many. What I've discovered is how do I launch is really at the heart of so many of the questions that I was seeing, either as a mentor, as a coach, as an educator. And so I started going down this path and discovering that there's a lot of books out there that address the skill sets. So if you're launching into your new career, there's a lot of books out there that's talking about how do you find that next dream job? How do you rewrite your resume? If you're launching a business, they'll talk about how do you come up with a business plan? How do you, for example, develop the financials and find your customers? And those books are so key and necessary. But I was seeing a gap I was seeing a gap out there, which is really a gap that's addressing this mindset. So I wrote the book to really say, let's look at the mindset. Because I think effective launches is a component of both skill set and knowledge, and also the right mindset. And so I wrote the book. The people I have in mind, actually, for writing the book were three different people. One is me, and I'll share a little bit about what I mean by that in a second. And second is my children. Imagining what I would hope they would know. What are the stories that will inspire them? What are the ideas when they're all grown up and they're launching and they can read, and hoping that this book will inject confidence and at least give them some things to reflect about. And then the third are students and friends. So those are the audiences I had in my mind's eye as I was writing. I wrote it for me because no matter how many times I've launched, it doesn't take away that fear factor. It doesn't take away that fear factor for the next launch. And so I wrote this to capture all the wisdom that people have been so generously shared with me over the last few years, so it can be a reminder to myself. And the irony is, in launching the launch book, I was experiencing all of that again, right? Like the fear of embarrassment if the book comes out terrible. The fear of not delivering, the fear of not doing right by the people who have generously shared their stories with me. What would they think of this? Because I want to honor them. So it doesn't get any easier, but at least this was a reminder, because now there's a framework I can think about as I'm launching that will hopefully make the next launches that I'm going to take a lot easier. And then two, this book is really a love song. All the stories that you read in there, and there's such a diversity of people represented. These are people who are dear to me, who have inspired me, who have given the generosity of their time. This is a love song to them, so that through the platform of a book, their stories and their wisdom can be amplified. I don't want to be selfish just to be the sole consumer of those. I want to share those stories, those wisdom, and those perspectives with the world. So,
and I gotta say, the story could relate to a lot of stories that the stories that people are encountering in their lives about what they were going through, when they were launching certain things or changing jobs, careers, and so I want to ask you, the book is written in a way that it offers 5 elements for a successful launch. One is be you, the other one is build your tribe, the third one is imagine, then we have next play, and then we have curiosity. Can you briefly talk about each section and just to give us an overview what it's about? And
yes, so I think for any launches, as you're addressing these external changes, and that's the reason, the driver for that launch, right? For that change, for that shift from the status quo, I have to start with understanding who you are first. What are you about? What's your purpose in life? What's your purpose behind the launch? Your why? And so being you it has to start with you and understanding what do you value, what energizes you, so that whatever it is that you're launching into or launching aligns with who you are. Because when you're doing something that's not in alignment with your values, or that is not in alignment with what's energizing, you're going to face a lot more obstacles. Right? So let's at least start with you, and then start with values, what energizes you, understanding your why. And no successful launch is ever done alone. When you think about it, you never get, we are where we are because of the generosity of others. For me, it's my parents who have given me this foundation, who believed in me, and my friends and teachers. And so even if you're launching a business and you're the solo entrepreneur, you are where you are because of others. And we get back on our feet after we fall, and we will fall at some point. We get back on our feet because of the others around us. And that's why we want to be that person for other people as well. Right? So building your tribe is in recognition of that. And so that's about who are the types of people, the types of roles you need to include. And those include your mentors. Those include people who are naysayers and truth tellers, because you need to understand what they're seeing so that you can eliminate a potential blind spot. They include your customers. And you might say at this point, gosh, if I am I'm launching into a new career, I'm not launching a business, I'm launching into a new career. Who are my customers? Well, the customers are really the people who are your potential employers, and being able to understand what their needs are so that you can add value and be relevant. And then also being able to ensure that as you're building your tribe and surrounding yourself with good people with the right values, integrity, that's a big one, with the right values, that you're also building in a diversity of background, a diversity of perspectives to be able to help you. So that's build your tribe. And failure is a big word. And so being able to look at success and failure, which are flip sides of the same coin, and being able to use those and the learnings from those to propel forward, that's about imagining. So imagining the possible. And your tribe members can help broaden your perspectives to be able to help you see beyond what you think is possible right now. And so that's about imagining, which also has an element of planning for luck too in there, which we can talk about in a little bit. And the last part, it's next play. Next play is, well, whether you're successful or whether you have an outcome that's different than what you have hoped for, you can't rest on your laurels, nor can you be shackled by your failures. It's about moving forward. It's continual movement forward. So it's about thinking next play. And I learned this from Coach K, because that's one of his mantras. Like, don't look in the rear view mirror too much. It's always next play. Whether your success or your failure, next play. What's next? That's how you grow. And generosity. So I've shared early on that we are who we are. Our successes are the result of the generosity of others. So don't wait until you're successful to be generous. Be generous today. A pattern I see is that the most successful people, by societal standards and also by standards of fulfillment and joy, are people who have this habit of being generous. And because we all recognize that we don't get to where we are by ourselves. And there's nothing we do to deserve that generosity of others. And so let's also turn around and be generous and be that person for others behind us and around us. So generosity is, I'm a big believer in generosity.
When I read that section, generosity, what it said to me is being humble to and open to receive, and to recognize that, people love to give, because most of us are concerned and, asking for, from people's time, but really being able and open to receive and to give at the same time.
Oh, that is so important. Yes, because I think you make such a good point. It seems to be so much easier on the giving end, but we've all been through situations where we're afraid to ask for help because we don't want to impose on others, or we feel like we have to have all the answers. And when we're at that point, we're so ready to invest in other people's success and helping them succeed. Why don't we also allow others to invest in our success and set aside our egos and be receptive to that help? And that's how we build really meaningful relationships, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When I was reading a book, I was left with a notion that, asking questions, listening, staying curious, exactly what you mentioned a little bit when you did the describing section, is the way to really good leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, a leader who knows it all, who is, ruling around and, can you a little bit talk about it? Why it's so vital to be vulnerable and to show people that you might not know the end, should I say the end result, or, can you talk a little bit about it?
Yes. So, oh my goodness, there's so many different directions I want to take the answer.
Yeah, so just take it.
so one is, the world is becoming increasingly unpredictable. Like we have disruptors. Like who ever imagined that Amazon would be in the grocery business, right? And Amazon is now in the grocery business. That's a disruptor to those who are in the grocery business. And so there's a huge element of, we're now living in, there's an acronym called VUCA, Volatile, Uncertain, Chaotic, Ambiguous World. And in such a world, it's unpredictable. And embracing the unpredictability means building the team that's ready to take on those changes and those turns when they land our way. And so it's, even if you have the answer right now, you know the answer, it's going to change. That answer is going to change in like 5 minutes because that's a rate of change. Well, maybe not 5 minutes, maybe next year, right? And so I think building in this idea of being able to and constantly retest our assumptions and broadening our perspectives, that's so important for leaders today, and for leaders to help foster that habit in their teams, that asking of questions, test assumptions, and reevaluating those assumptions on a regular basis. And then 2 is, questions are more generative, don't you think? Like when you're teaching your students, when you give them an answer, it doesn't stick as much as when you ask a question and suddenly that question doesn't open up things you may not have recognized before, or ideas that you may not have encountered. It's a new way of framing things. And opening up with questions leads to more possibilities and different ways of looking at things.
And possibly, in my opinion, as a former, as a teacher, giving a better answer. That's how, because then you get a understanding where the student is actually coming from, so that you can give it the information that he can actually, receive, understand, and implement. Yeah.
Yes. And I think a key part of that is being able to also not just ask the questions and asking the right questions, but also the listening and engaging and being receptive to that. I think one of the things we're seeing is so many times asking the right question is so important, because sometimes there's businesses that launch, but they're solving the wrong problems. Right? And so asking the right questions is an important skill set to be able to cultivate for any leader and their teams and their organizations. And then asking a question, there's an element of vulnerability in that, and that's inviting other people in to be able to share their perspectives when you ask that question. For those in leadership positions, because of the way people respond to authority, one has to be especially careful with how one answers, because that answer can be taken as definitive even when you're brainstorming. And so being in the habit of asking questions and inviting and sharing, you know what, I don't have the answer, but we can figure it out together. You're opening up the way to build a shared sense of ownership.
And I am very curious, you talked about mentorship. I'm moving into a different part of the book. I was very intrigued. You talked about mentors, but what really struck me, you said sometimes mentors are not, they don't have to be your teacher. They can be even your student, or it can be your neighbor, because I was trained to believe that if I'm going to look for a mentor, I'm going to look for someone that's, and I quote, better than I am, in a higher position, has a more knowledge, has a more education than I have, so that person is can guide me better. But you're actually arguing differently. You're saying, and could you clarify a little bit about it, to why, you're saying that actually a neighbor can be your mentor. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yes, and so, okay, so that there's actually two ways of answering that. So one is, a mentor does help you leapfrog whatever experience gap that you have. However, in today's world, when things are so more ecosystem-like, where the answer comes from, when the whole picture has to be drawn from a diversity of perspectives and understanding, age can be irrelevant in where those answers come from. And so in that sense, I think this traditional idea of the mentor being someone who's older than you is, I think it's changing in this world. I mean, I've seen leaders with the social media age, there's students, there's 20-some-year-olds who that's their area of expertise. And so being able to learn from someone younger, that is amazing, and that's incredible. So that's one answer. The other answer is, I've always found it really not on target with this idea of mentorship being a one-way street. So the thing I talked about before, there's a term for that. It's called reverse mentoring, where you're learning from someone who's younger than you are. I think about every mentoring relationship as a two-way street, where you're learning from each other. And so every mentorship relationship is in a way also a reverse mentorship relationship, right? So there's so many times, I'll give you an example. When I write an article as a draft, before it goes out into the public domain, I actually run it by, we have this a few amazing interns at our center, and they're undergraduates, and they're about 20 years younger than I am, and they're so just they're such a joy to be around. They energize me all the time and help me think about things in a different way. And before the article goes out, I would share the article with them and say, okay, what grabs you? Because you're the reader, you're the prospective reader. What grabs you about this article, and why? And then what doesn't make sense, and what should I eliminate? And that creates a dialogue, and they've helped because of their thinking and their feedback. And then through that, I can ask why, and I'm learning, because they're out there, they're learning new things all the time. I'm being exposed to new things, and so it makes the final draft a lot better, and it also enables me to learn, and they're learning as well. So it's a two-way street. I think effective mentorship comes from a place of recognizing, being open to learning from the mentee. And yes. I mean, don't you think in your teaching that you're constantly learning?
Oh yeah.
Your students. I mean, sure. I would love to hear an example.
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually become a good teacher you actually are learning from your students, and that actually makes you a better teacher, good
Mm-hmm.
teacher. And the more students you have, because exactly what you're saying, you're asking right questions, you're learning what they're thinking, and to what answers you're getting, you're forming your how you're gonna actually impart that knowledge upon them, because not everyone learning the same. So you're absolutely right. It's a two-way street, and I sometimes learn that I actually learn more from my students than but just simply listening to the questions that they're asking. So
Yes.
so you're absolutely right about that.
Part of that is, I think, leaders today, to be more effective, need to speak to a wide swath of people. And so imagine, like, if you are in a tech business, you may be talking to an engineer, you may be talking to a creative, you may be talking to a programmer, you may be talking to a supplier, and being able to listen and hear and learn from the other person is actually you're broadening your vocabulary and actually your range of being able to convey the same message in different frames or different languages.
Right.
So, for example, you just shared it helps you become a better teacher as you're asking questions and listening to their questions and listening to their answers. Part of that is you're also building a vocabulary, because your students are also very diverse. So you're building a vocabulary for how to convey an idea. If this one way doesn't work for this one student, you have that range to be able to pull in other language.
Yeah, and I think what you're just saying. It's also reminding me of another chapter of yours that you said, engage your customers. In your launch, can you talk a little bit why it's so important to meaningfully engage? You said your customers.
Well, if what we're launching, it's a dynamic, right? So one, it has to align with you, and two, it has to be relevant. It has to be relevant to who you're launching, what that project is for. So if you are launching into a new career, the customer is your prospective employer. You're in the industry that you're entering into. If you're launching a ice cream store, your prospective customer are those people who will consume your ice cream. And if you're launching a project within an organization, a new project, an entrepreneurship project, your customer is actually the units that you'll be affecting, as well as your superiors that you have to get their buy-in. And so what I've seen is sometimes we create something, we can all fall into the trap of creating something, and in our heads it's great, but it's in a way that works only for us, but it doesn't work for the end user, right? And so what if we start engaging them in the very beginning, instead of waiting until we have a perfect product and then doing and then saying, oh, it's just relevant.
Yeah, it's not working.
Yeah, it's not working. Engaging them from the very beginning, and in that dynamic, we go through a discovery process, and that's the fun of it. So when you think about whether it's our careers or whether it's a business, there's not a lot of times when what you imagine the end product to be, when you start it, the launch ends up being exactly that, right? Because once you start engaging customers, you're going to see different ways that product or your skill sets can be applied, and you're also going to see different ways where they may not be as relevant. So let's go back to that example of the sharing that draft with the students before it gets published, and tell you how many times there will be a paragraph or a sentence that I'm absolutely in love with, that I think I poured in, and I think this is such a beautiful paragraph. And they said, oh, nope, don't get it. They don't get they aren't getting it. I know it's it, but this other part, this art part is really interesting. I thought, really? That's a part I thought was uninteresting. Okay, let's explore that more. And then at the end, I ended up tossing, because they were right. And I read it over again, and I got caught up in the words rather than the idea. That paragraph, let's chuck it, and then let's explore this other paragraph and that idea a little bit more. And so when I put it out, by the time I'm ready to publish it, I know it will have traction for that very reason. It was already co-created with a prospective reader. And same thing with the launch book. If for those who are reading it, I would suggest reading the last chapter first, because the last chapter is about the launch of the launch book, and you'll all see what a complete mess I am in real life. But I wanted to be sure to be vulnerable and share, here's like the ups and downs of the process, where one day I think it's going to be great, and the next day I just want to quit writing, because I think it's important for the reader to know I'm right there with you, that I'm experiencing whatever fears, whatever elation, whatever constraints in time that you're experiencing with your launches, I'm right there with you. So read that last chapter first. And in that last chapter, one of the things I spoke about was I remember I was in a complete bind, because I had only written, I think, 450 words or 650 words, and I needed 25,000 words in basically 6 or 7 weeks. And I only had 450 words written, because I was trying to aim for just perfection. And then when you get caught up in this idea of perfection, like it has to be perfect, then that's when, well, at least for me, and I think a lot of us, we start procrastinating. Rather than just starting, we don't start, we procrastinate. And I remember one of the things I held that I was thinking through was, oh my goodness, how do we pull in all this research and ideas into, and how do we organize it into this book and have the words come out? And I sat down with one of these wonderful students, interns, Isabel, and I just asked her, what would make you, when you go into a bookstore, you're having so many demands on your time. Now, first of all, just reading a book is, you're competing with that newest movie on Amazon or Netflix, a newest TV show, time hanging out with your friends, your assignments. So when you choose to read a book, that's a big decision. What makes you, and she's a reader, she's a voracious reader. I said, when you go into a store or you go on, you go online, what makes you want to pick up a book? And I thought for sure her answer would be, wow, it has so much research in it, and it sounds so, and it's about being smart and all that. And her answer completely surprised me. She said, stories. That's why I pick up a book. It's stories. I thought, oh, I have stories. These stories have been in my head. It's all these people have shared their stories with me the last 10 years that have been so helpful to me. I have stories, so let's focus on stories. And so that's part of, as well as is a prospective reader, a representative of the prospective customer. And so that's why there's so many stories in the launch. It was built around stories and ideas, and for people to see elements of their own stories in those stories and being able to relate and say, oh, the context may be completely different, but because one of the things is everyone has a different path. So everyone's path to launching, even though you can have two people both starting an ice cream shop, but the context for those two people, because they have two completely different lives, is going to be so different. Their path to launching that ice cream shop cannot be the same, or it's unlikely that they're the same. And so, for people to be able to read the stories and see the elements that apply to them and the analogies, and letting them take it forward from there, I think that's. So anyways, that was a story about engaging with a prospective customer, landing on an answer that helped give me the confidence to sit down and really push forward in writing.
So, can you share one of your favorite stories from the book? I mean, I really like Deborah Lee James' story when she talks about her career being. I mean, it doesn't have to be that story, but what is your favorite story from the book? Because there were lots of stories, good stories.
There are so many favorite stories from the book. Deborah Lee James is certainly. She is a remarkable leader.
Oh,
I mean, she's 23rd Secretary of the Air Force, and when you meet her, she is so personable, and when she asks questions and she listens, and she actually is a team builder, and she injects confidence, and so I think her story was really about how she landed on the career path that she had today because of an outcome that she had that was very different than what she had hoped for. Early on in her career, she wanted to go into the Foreign Service, and so she charted out the path, did all the right things, and was not selected, and had to quickly pivot to a different path. But that path ended up being so amazing, because it was responsive to who she is as a person. If you know Deb James, Secretary James, you would know that she is very mission driven, and she is about a life of service, right? And she was able to express that in her career in government. And though it's different from the Foreign Service, she made such a phenomenal impact both in the corporate sphere as well as being Secretary of the Air Force. One of my favorite stories is really one of my mentors, Frances Hesselbein. So Frances is, oh my goodness, here in New York, if you can, you must visit Frances. So Frances is the former CEO of the Girl Scouts, and under her tenure, under her leadership, she was able to turn. I think she tripled the diversity of the membership, and she doubled the membership itself. So she really turned around the organization, and because of that, it was a volunteer force of 700,000 people. The U.S. U.S. Army came seeking her advice on leadership. And so she was also a co-developer of the U.S. Army's leadership development model, which is the be, know, do. But you know who you are, be, know, and then do of that model. And then she became the first CEO of the Peter Drucker Leadership Institute, which has now been renamed the Hesselbein Leadership Institute by the board. So Frances is, there's this program in New York called Principal for a Day, where different leaders get to be principal for a day at a school. Now, those people, our default is to choose like the best schools and the schools that have been very positive in the public domain, because it's, that's how human beings are. And Frances did something very different. She said, "What is the worst school? What's the worst school?" And they said, "Well, it's this school in the Bronx. They've never graduated a single student. I want to be principal of that school for a day." So she visited that school, and I'm sharing this story because I think it weaves together some of our earlier conversations around questions and listening. And she started here's this person who has this vast experience in leadership, and especially in education, Girl Scouts. And instead of coming in and saying, well, this is what we should do to change the school and how we should restructure it, she started by talking with the students. The students are the customers. She asked them, what do you need? I said, well, it would be wonderful if we have books. We have a library. So she called her friends and she called her contacts and we got books to that school. Right? And those books were also had diversity. They were written by authors from all different races and genders. And then she said, what else do you need? It would be great if we have textbooks. Right now, the only person in our school who has textbooks is our teacher. So he or she has to photocopy these pages. Francis calls up the mayor of New York. What else do you need? It would be wonderful if we have mentors. Corporate mentors that can really show us what are some of the possibilities out there. So she called up some of her corporate, she tapped into her corporate network and she got the students' corporate mentors. And by the end of that year, there were 15 graduates, and of that class, first graduates of our vet school graduates, and one of them went to the U.S. Air Force. When you think about this tremendous, this is someone who Peter Drucker has deemed the most natural leader he has ever met. It was this vast. How can I help? Listened. Made a tremendous impact. Biana?
Yes. Sorry, I just lost you for a second. So this was a talk for those of you who join us later, later in the program. This was a talk on the Launch book that is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I think one more. Target, yes. So again, this book is truly unique because it can guide you through a process of launching. It can teach you how to do it effectively, and it's full of great stories on on launching your ideas, business, and next career. So we're almost close to the end. Can you give us your final thought on leadership?
Final thought on leadership. Yeah. I'll combine it with launching. Right? It's about, if we're all about growing, one of my favorite quotes out there is, we're not yet whom we shall become. Isn't that wonderful?
Wow.
Because
who said that?
I think it was Martin Luther. Luther, either Martin Luther or St. Augustine. I have to remember, my memory is a little bit short today. But I love that quote because it means we can't rest on our laurels, and nor are we shackled by our failures, that we're growing, right? We're growing. We have to continue to be mindful of the type of person whom we shall become. And part of that is, so connecting with launch. Launch in pursuit, becoming your best self. Have that vision of becoming that best self, and that best self is someone who can make a positive difference on other people's lives.
That's beautiful. And I think with that, I thank you, Sanyan, for being with us tonight. It was a great pleasure having you. I know you had a very busy schedule and you made time to be with us. So thank you again for that.
Biana, this is such a delight. It's an honor and a delight to be a guest on your show. Thank you so much for your championship.
Thank you. And for those of you who were with us tonight, please check out the Launch book again. It's a motivational stories for launching your ideas, business, and next career, and it's available again on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I'm forgetting again the third.
Target.com. BarnesandNoble.com and Target.com.
Got it, Target. That's where I got it from. I got it from Amazon. Actually, I got it from Amazon.com as a Kindle version. Thank you. This one was Leadership with Biana Kovic show. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Leadership again with Biana Kovic, and wishing you a wonderful evening and great week ahead. Please come back next Monday, June 25th with us, 9 p.m. Eastern Central Time, and have a great evening.